Howdy, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today? I am Ali Fayyad 1991. I will be your host for this afternoon, evening, depending on whatever part of the world you're in. Today, the topic of the show is skepticism. What does it mean to be a good skeptic? What does it mean to be, or what is being a bad skeptic? Today on the show, we have myself, of course, the most important person on the call. We have CS Bear.
Hello, everyone.
We have Answers in Books.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Lewis. I'm sorry, I don't know the rest of your name, or I don't know if you want me to give that away. So just say
Yeah,
hi.
no, Lewis A. Beach is fine, or either of those words and syllables is absolutely fine. I'm open to identity
Okay.
awareness.
And of course, we have our awesome tech guy, Colin, who will probably not be able to say hi, or you won't be able to hear him, because he's cool like that. So, yeah. Uh, who wants to start off? Or we're also taking callers today because we have limited amounts of people on the panel. So if you want to be added to the call, add either myself or the Skeptic TV show Skype account, which is simply I'll just put it up top, and you can call in and maybe add your opinion, maybe ask a question or whatnot and so forth. So does anyone want to start off on what it means to be a good skeptic?
I guess I can start. And just a warning to everyone out there, if you want to call in or do whatever, Lewis may be in a bad mood today, so anything will set him off. Just mention the
Nah,
Texans will come in last place and you'll get a tirade. So,
fucking
but
stab you.
proof positive. But being a skeptic is more of just in today's societies and just taking more than one side and getting all the information you can before making any decision and realize that your decision isn't set in stone. There could be another side you haven't listened to that has more concrete evidence for you to weigh your final decision on. So it's been kind of decent for me to just sit back and listen and just wait before making any good decisions about things.
Well, I think I'll mention what I said right before the actual show started. This is what I intend as being a good skeptic and a bad skeptic. A bad skeptic is someone who like just goes on stuff based on emotion. For example, someone who's like 9/11 was an inside job, you know, even though the evidence goes to the contrary. Um, you know, a good skeptic is someone who like if I came up to Bear and said, "Hey, Bear, guess what? I can fly," and he's like, "I don't really believe you." Well, then he's not an idiot, and I'm one for even claiming that. But so, you know, that's what it really means to be a good skeptic. And what's oh God, I hate you, Yoshimo. Even from not here, he's fucking with me. Um,
He's at work right now.
yeah, I know. I just lost the game. So, so yeah, that's what, in my opinion, is the difference between a good and a bad skeptic. If we want to talk about bad skepticism, we can talk about, you know, this mass hysteria of like stuff like 9/11, the truthers, the people who believe in you know, the tinfoil hat people. Which, if we talk about tinfoil hat, it's pretty sad to me because like a lot of y'all know I'm a history major, so like I used to love the history channel. It used to give me a massive hard on, but like really it turned into the tinfoil hat channel. All that the history channel is now is UFO shows. um UFO shows. It's conspiracy theory shows, aka the tinfoil hat shows, and ice road truckers. What the fuck, dude?
By the
If
way,
I,
Lewis,
if I can leap in on the tinfoil hat thing,
Go
um,
for it.
I think that actually there was a paper published a while back on the issue of tinfoil hats themselves, and the researchers actually measured, I think I'm right in saying, various EM radiation inside a tinfoil hat and found that it aided amplification of various bandwidths. So it actually would make it theoretically easier for people to pick up on a chip in your head if you were wearing a tinfoil hat. something that you can throw out there the next time you meet someone who wears one.
Hey, Lewis, I just want to say something. The Holocaust was an inside job.
Well, that one is actually kind of true. I mean, depends on who you say is doing the. No, I mean, depends on who you're saying is did the inside job. If you're saying the Jews did it as an inside job, that's kind of fucking stupid. But if, like, you say that the Germans did it as an inside job, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
It's still hilarious that there are people out there who think that Jews made up the entire Holocaust and there's no evidence for it.
Well,
All
they
the
are
pictures
sneaky.
were forgeries. It's
If
just
I can,
hilarious.
if I can, I just wanted to find out because Mr. Beach, the other Lewis, hasn't said anything, and his YouTube identity is the rational skeptic. So I feel that he should be an authority on what makes a good one.
Well, yes, I mean the name itself is reasonably tautological, but I'll give it. I think a good definition has been offered. A good skeptic is someone who would rationally look at what is being claimed, apply the scientific method, apply at least a reasonable sense of logic, and weigh up all the claims regardless of authority or the media through which they are being presented with the claim, and someone who does a complete analysis rather than a more ideological, an ideologically biased analysis, which, as we were just talking about with 9/11 truthers or whatever, there's a kind of a inbuilt sort of almost liberal conspiracy of oh, it's a government cover-up and no one's quite happy when it's doing that, or there's also on the sort of the more right-wing scale of the skeptics who are Obama's a socialist, or he doesn't, or his birth certificate hasn't been is a forgery, and all these kind of things. So there is kind of political, ideological skeptics on both sides, and it needs to be remembered that skepticism is not, of course, an ideology by any means. It's a clear it's a clear practice. It's a method. It's an approach rather than an actual identity or ideological identity, at least.
Well, the what I was gonna say to add to Chris is, like, a lot of people think that, the Jews would make all that stuff up because they're pretty sneaky. I mean, have you seen The Social Network? Dude, that Mark Zuckerberg's one sneaky motherfucker. I kid.
That's
But
okay. I'll look online later and find out that Lewis's Facebook account has been canceled.
God damn you, Mark Zuckerberg. No, he's already planning on doing that because I keep, like, promoting Google Plus, even though Google Plus isn't really launching. But let's not get into that. Another thing that interests me about the whole, I literally got into this argument yesterday with a fucking friend of mine. He was my best friend in middle school. I'm so sad that he's turned into a fucking idiot. He's apparently a 9/11 truther. He's like, yeah, he, like, sent me some video about, like, how the fucking Pentagon and shit. I'm like, dude, they've explained through science that a plane hit that building. He's like, come on, Lewis, how come there was a book in the next room next to the hole that wasn't singed or whatever? I'm like, I don't know. There's weirder shit to happen. But even
My
if that
favorite.
was true, the building got hit on the side that was specifically built to be bomb and, like, blast proof. So, like, if they chose a worse side to get hit, it was that one.
And one of my favorite comments about the 9/11 truthers was somebody was adamant that a plane had never hit the Pentagon, that it had to have been a missile because they didn't find any plane parts. And I pulled up a website that was from a newspaper that showed aerial photos and photos from across the highway of plane parts all over the yard. And his reply to that was, how come none of these are on the truther websites?
Durr, because it disproves your point, dumbass.
I was like, did you just answer your own question? Yeah, see, you found it easily too.
Not just that, but there's, like, there's a whole, like, myriad of shit that they found inside the building: landing gear, parts of the engines, all that stuff. And it's like, they're like, no, dude, it was a missile. They planted that afterwards. Yes, they planted that in plain sight.
Yeah, there's also people who ask, why aren't there wing-shaped holes on the sides? I'm like, the wings pretty much break off when they hit big stone structures. It's just they don't think logically about these things. They think cartoonishly. There's one of the landing gears.
One of the interesting things about the claim of the equipment attached to the undercarriage of the aircraft as it glows. We've all seen that sort of pixelated slow motion footage of I believe it's the first plane that hits. I think it's a Boeing 757, and it heads straight towards the building, and then they put a red circle around it or whatever and say, "What's this?" If you actually, I was investigating some of these claims, and if you actually look at do a very basic Google image search at American Airlines sort of livery and have a look at the undercarriage of these planes. It's a paint job, or it's the under. That's that's the plane that's being shown there. That's a paint job. You can see those lines going right down, and I've just been trying to look for the picture.
American Airlines plane. Yeah.
Yes, and that's just the livery. That's not equipment added or whatever.
Well, I love how they get people who say like, "I didn't see any windows down the side of it." I'm like, well, maybe that's because when you see a plane that's really far away, you can't really see that many details. I mean, my house in Houston is right underneath I guess a Southwest Airlines like plane route or whatever, because there's always planes flying like right overhead, and I don't see windows either. So, are they secret government planes too?
Well,
I
there
mean,
was
I
one.
guess that's the only explanation.
The weirdest explanation I've ever seen for people explaining away the second plane and the first one that's seen in that amateur documentary video is the fact that the U.S. government has technology that they put on these missiles that holographically display them as planes.
Oh my God. What?
Mm-hmm.
That's now we're getting into Star Wars tech.
I
But
know. It's like, okay, reality is so far against you that you're making up complete conspiracies and technology that we can't even know whether it exists, that they use solely to blow up buildings.
They're also making up 100 odd or maybe 200 odd personal identities and back histories, because we can easily trace the tickets of the passengers that were on board, the flight passes or whatever.
No, what happened with those people is they're still alive. They landed all in Cleveland,
Oh
got
yes.
onto a secret plane. Now, I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I've been to that airport many times. I know for a fact you cannot put any plane on that field without people being able to see it.
so
And
you're
no
part
one
of the
remembers seeing such a
conspiracy.
plane.
So you're part of the conspiracy.
With the equipment on the underbelly of the plane, one thing that's interesting me is at what point did they attach that on? Did someone at the airport not notice some odd-looking bits of equipment as the plane took off from the airport, or was it somehow assembled in mid-flight, which I
Not
doubt?
just that, but like, why would you attach a missile to a plane that you're planning to crash into a building? I mean, honestly, you're crashing a plane into a building. What more do you fucking need? It's a it's a massive 100-ton plane, bigger than any small, missile could ever do. And they're like, dude, the aviation fuel doesn't burn long enough to melt steel. It doesn't need to melt it. It just needs to weaken it. It's like,
So, I mean, yeah, as skeptics, they can explain something and you just go, well, how is that supposed to work? Or, what if this were to happen? You just follow through the steps. And as soon as they shut off all communications, as soon as they say, well, that's it, you have your opinion, I have mine, and you realize that they can't really defend their position.
well, one thing that in that loose change video, because when I was like in the sixth grade or whatever, I saw that loose change video. I'm like, holy shit, that seems legit. Because I was stupid. I was in the sixth grade. So like, I'm watching that shit, and looking back at it now, like I've rewatched it a couple times to like see like what the fuck, and they're like, this is the landing gear they found in the Pentagon or whatever. It doesn't match, see? And they like show and they compare it to like what the landing gear on the 757 looks like, and then they compare it to another plane like a fighter jet, which is what they say also crashed in the Pentagon. I'm like, well, first, both of those planes are made by the same company. They're both made by Boeing. Two, the landing gear for the 757 they compared it to is another model of 757, because there's like different models. There's the 757-200, the 757-300, the 757 600, extended range, shit like that. It was a different model, and they'd have different landing gear types. So it's like they pick and choose it's similar. It's very similar to apologetic Christianity. They pick and choose stuff or fundamentalist Christianity. They pick and choose stuff so it makes their point look valid. So it's really pathetic, honestly. And I was talking to my friend face palming the entire time. I'm like, I can't believe my fucking friend has become an idiot. I thought I'd pick my friends better than that. I guess not. I need to stop hanging out with you assholes before you guys turn on me.
If I can throw a question out there, with these, with the 9/11 conspiracies, whichever conspiracy it is, it will involve thousands of people doing years worth of work trying to cover up what would be the largest hoax ever. Yeah. The truthers sit and look at the footage that everyone else looks at and see evidence of a conspiracy. Do any of you think that that's perhaps just arrogance on their part, that they think they are more intelligent than, well, the people that they suspect have committed the conspiracy and everyone else?
Well, I had this conversation. I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was going to say, I usually follow that up by going, Watergate was known by fewer than 10 people, and they couldn't keep that under their
I thought
hat.
it was 12, whatever.
I thought it was less than 10.
Well, whatever, it was
still,
very little.
Yeah, and that still exploded in less than a year. So what makes them think that this huge conspiracy of the government to defraud everyone into a war on 9/11 can still be kept silent? I mean,
like, honestly, I could probably start a more successful 9/11 conspiracy theory if I said that the government had funded Al Qaeda to do it. That is much more believable than say, I mean, let's get something straight. I don't believe that, but that is much more believable than saying the government made up everyone on those planes. They had remote control planes flying into buildings. They managed to get explosives into a very busy office building, in order to demolish it. My way is simpler and much more believable. It's kind of like Occam's razor. It's much more believable to believe that than say all that shit was needed in order to make 9/11 an inside job or whatever.
I think it also comes down to the tribalist psychology of conspiracy theorists, creationists, or whatever, the in-grouping that such a phenomena, whether true or not, attracts. That a certain type of people, they sort of gravitate towards each other, and they feel empowered by. As Answer's book said, or suggested, that the type of arrogance that they know something that perhaps we don't, they can see fault with the government, and it's them that have the answer. It's them that know how to get us out of this. It's them that know where the problems lie and where we're going. But you talk to these people, and that's really. I was in New York last year, and I spoke to a truther just outside where the Twin Towers once were at Ground Zero. And he really did. He had all his answers sort of ready, almost on a piece of paper, on like a list to, when I would ask him a question, he'd like scan down and choose, right, that's the answer I need. And he talks about his friends that are in the movement and how many friends he's made within the movement. And I really do think it's that group psychology of these people, that they're so passionate about this one thing that. And I think, again, that's a definition of a bad skeptic, someone that is so passionate about this sort of thing that they gravitate towards each other and feed off each other.
I have my own theory about that. I mean, I definitely agree that the whole I know more than the average person plays into it, but I think it also has a kind of it has an aspect of fear to it, because I think it has more to do with like an ideal that, it's not they're trying to justify that it's not possible for 19 dudes from Afghanistan or wherever they were from to be able to they don't think they think it's more likely for the government, big bad government, to be in on it than to be able to admit that, or believe that 19 dudes, from uh, yeah, I know it wasn't they weren't Afghanis, they were mostly Saudis, etc. I think it was 15 of them were Saudi. But yeah, whatever. Wherever they were from, whatever. They don't want, and plus the average person's stupid. They probably think they're all from Afghanistan. Um, if they think it's much more likely, they want to believe that it was more likely for the government to be able to do this than for, 19 dudes to be able to pull off something of this magnitude. It's kind of like they don't want to believe that it's that easy for terrorists to get away with something like that. So it has to be something deeper. It has to be something rooted in the government, the big government, which can do everything it wants and get away with whatever. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
it is a conspiracy technically because it's a bunch of, different dudes getting together and doing it, but it's not the government conspiring to do it.
yeah, and it's also with the recent arguments I've heard from climate change deniers, is that they think that they have questions that aren't reasonably being answered. Therefore, there's a possibility that the official statement isn't right. And the fact that they aren't addressing the questions properly means that maybe the people asking the questions are right.
Well, that going, skepticism towards another level, like on something like evolution. They say like, like Darwin wasn't right. Like we've known he wasn't right for a long ass time. He set up the theory. It's not like Darwin, it's not like the origin of the species came back and scientists everywhere were like, "Yep, we're done. Just kick back on the desk and get a paycheck." That's not how it works. They've been working at this for fucking years. That's why there's still scientists now. If we were done looking into this, if we were done, researching and looking up new stuff, there wouldn't be a point to be a scientist, at least not an evolutionary one.
Yeah, Darrell O'Brien has the best comeback for people who say, if science is right, how come we're still researching? Because if science or knew all the answers, then it would just stop. The fact
Exactly.
that we're still researching means we don't know everything, therefore we have to go out and find more knowledge.
And again, this is the definition of a good skeptic, someone who is already on the side of Darwin, shall we say, but investigates the claim away from its original origin and looks into the claim, not denying the foundation of the theory of evolution by natural selection, but looking at where Darwin went wrong, updating what Darwin was thinking about, what was talking about, but not denying him in any sense, because we know that he stumbled across, him and others, such as Alfred Wallace and other people, stumbled across a very revolutionary theory that is not only applicable biologically, but culturally and electronically, and can exist on so many different levels. And again, that's the definition of a good skeptic, someone that doesn't say, no, Darwin got this wrong, therefore he's entirely wrong. Let's look at where he fell short and build upon that. And again, I think that's the sign of a good skeptic, someone who builds upon something rather than starts cold and tries to knock down all the foundations of a particular theory or an idea or whatever.
If I can jump in there on the good skeptic part, because we've spoken a lot about the bad skeptics. Something that's difficult, I think, these days is being a good skeptic day to day. You go out to the shops, you go to buy a drink, you go to buy supplements, medicines, food, anything, and you are bombarded by claims. And these are all factual claims or presented as factual claims. Such and such product will do this for you. This product is shown to be better. Your hair will shine brighter. You will attract members of the opposite or same sex.
If you drink this bleach water, it will make you healthier.
Exactly. And this presents everyone in society with a real problem. How do you be a good consumer skeptic? And for me, I've got some science background. I can read the labels, can call on knowledge from a specialist field and say, yeah, that claim's probably not as valid as this one. I will vouch for this one and go and spend my money on that. But how does the ordinary person in the street go and make those intelligent shopping decisions?
They look it up on Wikipedia.
But if you're out already,
also on that is, and this comes down to a more personal trait, a personality trait, is how talking about being a skeptic on a daily basis. How do you confront people necessarily who are talking about a certain thing? I was in a pub a while ago, and people were talking about these sort of more middle-aged and older people were talking about loose change. Now, I wasn't having a conversation with them, but they were talking about it so much, and I was trying to give off skeptical body language, if we can sort of coin such a term. And I really felt compelled to move in on their territory. But I knew it really wasn't my right to do so. Whereas if someone's talking to me about a homeopathic claim or whatever, which happened the other day, you feel more obliged to talk to someone. But again, it's on the different personalities. If you're presented with quite an intimidating person, sometimes one doesn't have the courage to really combat their claims, and when you're at a social gathering or whatever, how do you introduce the topic or whatever? How much of a skeptic can you be in a social atmosphere?
it is hard because it depends who you're with and the claims that they've made. I've been in situations where the people you're with will all of a sudden produce a belief, an assertion that you had no idea they were into. And you will know from background knowledge in the area that what they're saying is false. And you are then put in this awkward state where you want to help your fellow human being, your friend, and direct them towards the evidence or point them in the right direction for their own decisions, but you don't want to insult them either. And that is what tends to be the case, unfortunately, in a stereotype. The skeptic will come across in jokes and in anecdotes and whatever you want to mention as this arrogant person who knows more than you, who is claiming a greater knowledge than you, in just a general social situation, and it's very, very difficult.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, there are tons of people who go accommodationists who say, well, you have to tone it down, you have to be nicer to these people, everything like that. It's like, well, they're spewing stupidity in the public. Why exactly do we have to be nice? If we're correct, we can just go, here's how they're wrong, here's what we're doing. And it's like, no, you're not going to get the message across unless you go, well, they have nice ideas and they can apply to certain things. But we believe, it's like, we don't believe this. This is fact.
But socially, I don't know if you can actually just base how far you can actually take that, whether you can base a confrontation upon the factuality of the claim. Of course, if someone's talking about homeopathy, of course it's wrong. But just because you're right doesn't really mean you can go straight at them, or doesn't really give you the confidence to go straight at them and say, well, this is why it's wrong, like AnswersBooks was talking about. I don't know how many people on this, probably none of you, I know AnswersInBooks had. I've got this video on my YouTube channel when I was doing a ghost hunt, and one of the cameras caught two girls who were on the ghost hunt complaining about me. And that whole night was rather, a lot of the investigations I've been on, I felt quite a cold reception, because, like AnswersBook was saying, I was considered perhaps arrogant or cynical, perhaps is the more apt claim. And even though I knew I was right, or even though I had the more rational answers that all these bangs or whatever, it's the wind or people moving or whatever, it still doesn't give you the confidence, nor does it give you the put you in the ethical situation to say, I'm right, and therefore I should be able to say this exactly as I want. I wish I personally had the confidence to tackle anyone who was wrong, but I think, again, in a social environment, it's not necessarily, unfortunately, it's not necessarily how right you are, it's how well you present yourself. And I don't think you can really amputate yourself too much from that dynamic in a social environment.
There's been one time that I've completely amputated myself, to borrow your phrase, from the social environment, and that was for pure mimicry purposes. I was out in town, and there were a group of evangelical street preachers. They'd set themselves up, and they were yelling, screaming at the general public going by doing their shopping, and they were coming out with all sorts of things. The general, you will go to hell, etc., etc. There is God. What about this? What about that? Questions, all the sorts of things that we typically know from creationists. It was all coming out. So I just went, right. And I put myself next to them and took the same stance as them, the same posture as them, went to the same volume as them, and just started listing out various things that contradicted what they were saying. So they would say something along the lines of, God made us perfect. God designed our bodies and they are perfect. And I would list things like, what sort of a God would make a perfect body with the esophagus and the trachea such a way round that food has to pass over the trachea in order for you to swallow it, which means that you can choke. What sort of a God would make human beings with all but one step of being able to synthesize vitamin C within their own bodies? And this response didn't get a great response from the public. The public themselves ignored me as much as the preachers. But what it did do was make the preachers aware that I was there doing exactly the same thing as them, and they stopped. And they confronted me quietly instead until such point as they left. They found the idea of me being there so offensive, doing exactly the same thing that they were doing, that they ended up leaving. And that's the only time that I've completely amputated myself, as Lewis said, from the social norms.
Yeah.
I do think. Oh, sorry. Carry on.
I was just going to say I was going to take it a little bit off, but it's mainly also when you're having a conversation with people and they decide, well, I know I'm right because this person with a PhD in this field says, this exact thing. And it's like, well, can I see their papers? And usually the people haven't read the papers, and I'll go through and read the actual papers and go, well, they didn't actually do any tests or anything. They're just making arguments in this. And they go, well, he has a PhD. I said, millions of other people with PhDs in the same field contradict what he's saying. And they always go, oh, they're part of the cabal or whatever. I mean, it's just no matter what you do with these people, no matter how polite you are, no matter how you try to show them respectfully that they're wrong, they have this idea and they cannot give it up. And they will deny reality by doing double standards, by just refusing to apply logic. And at the end of it, you're just like, okay, well, no matter what you say, I'm going to tell people he's an idiot.
I'm sure you can all relate to having conversations with people, and the argument evolves into a debate about the logic of arguments or the rights of each other. I'm sure many of you have had the claim thrown at you that one holds a right to their own opinion. And it's funny because in fact you don't hold a right to your own opinion. You have a right to hold an opinion, but you don't have a right to an opinion, because that opinion may be horribly wrong and could be incredibly dangerous, depending upon the opinion it is. We've all got the right to hold an opinion, but we all have the right to criticize an opinion. And holding one opinion isn't a right. That's something that should be questioned and should be tackled. And I just find it really amusing and incredibly irritating when you encounter someone and they change the argument to more of a semantic argument or one upon rights when they take it to a more emotional level. And it's really when they take it to that emotional level and sort of disassociate themselves from the rational conversation that's going on and the fallacies that each party is making, that you realize how emotionally attached they are to their belief, as you were saying, and how much a lot of them don't wish to give up their belief, to the point where they will associate such argumentation with the right to hold an opinion and the right to debate an opinion, and then how much personally and emotionally a certain thing helps one another, like perhaps psychics and mediums or homeopathy or whatever. And it's incredibly irritating, but it's a temperament that one must be, or that I find personally, I need to tread carefully when I'm going through this, because I do understand that although they're wrong, psychics and homeopathy and things like that And I guess conspiracy theories, in a sense, to going back to what we were saying earlier, does offer a lot of comfort to people, and some of them are harmless, but again, that we have to weigh up at what point do we go in socially and adopt social norms or completely throw them out when we're in extreme cases like Answers in Books, or when you're talking to perhaps a parent or a relative who feels they've been cured by faith healing or whatever, and how much you venture into that conversation is also is I find at least always a big issue. Trying to not come across as obnoxious either, because when I guess they see us who hold the opposing opinion to believe in them as passionately as they believe in the opposite position, and it is boggy ground, I find, to start encroaching upon when you want to sort of point out the flaws in what they're saying, or provide some alternative explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had a similar situation as Answers in Books, where I've been talking to a preacher, and you can really push it there to how far you want to go. I can't say I've taken up the position of yelling opposing facts, but I do take a policy that people have to come to me before I really intervene, and maybe that's a flaw on my part. Maybe I should man up a little bit and stop being such a coward when it comes to that kind of that kind of conversation. But it's great really to try and redirect their focus away from the public and at least into the conversation.
Yeah, but then you get into Pratt's, the points refuted 1,000 times, and you realize that these people are arguing the same things that you've already debunked with maybe a dozen other people over the past 10 years. And you're like, why do I have to cover this ground again? Show me evidence that your idea is possibly correct, and I'll listen. Like, well, this person said, okay, you have no evidence, then just stop talking to me. It comes to a point where they're just repeating the same debunked lies that somebody else has told them because they haven't learned their knowledge. They've taken it from someone else. And you're like, you're not worth my time,
Well, I think when you put yourself into the position that we do, where we want to actively, make aware the processes and the operations and practices of science, that unfortunately we have to engage in such a routine, and it can become incredibly frustrating. But I do feel fine as you do that, one learns more, like more rhetorical tricks and argumentative sort of ways of trying to elude people in or whatever. And I guess with me, it's just trying to not sound obnoxious and cynical when trying to present an opposing view, and in some cases try and make the opposing view sound interesting. Now I know that may be a little bit intellectually dishonest, and maybe I should perhaps just go out there guns blazing or whatever, but I do find that in my case a lot of people I've spoken to prefer that approach, or seem to respond positively towards an approach like that, rather than just going at them with a list of opposing views. And you almost have to play their game a little bit.
Yeah, but with some of my videos, even videos I made last year and have almost completely forgotten about, I'll still get comments on there like, well, were you there? Or, how do you know he isn't talking about this? And it's like, let me go watch the video again because I can't remember what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's revisiting old stuff that clearly I made an argument for in my video, and they're not refuting my argument. They're instead just putting up a straw man, or they're just going off on their own little tangent. And
no,
I can't invest that much time in you. I'm sorry.
Yes, no, I can relate to that. When it comes to YouTube videos, I can relate to that.
Now, normally I keep my mouth shut on the shows, but there's also another factor with people that are, say, bad skeptics. And that is that they have, at a certain level, enough science to actually get your own confirmational bias.
Yes, absolutely.
What I mean with that is that they know enough science to see the flaws in current studies, the flaws in methodologies, or know enough to rebut what you're saying. But they don't grasp the entire picture.
Right. I mean, there are some scientists too who are religious and they go into their field and they start researching like biology, microbiology, whatever they need, whatever they're researching, and suddenly they report a paper that says, "Well, God can exist in this." It's like, what? I've seen plenty of papers like that, and I just read through, and it's like, you did no studies on this. You just assumed God and tried to put what you were studying into that framework. I mean, those people who are supposed to be skeptical of the scientific method, they're applying to certain things, but they will refuse to do it to their religious beliefs.
Yeah, there is this sort of separate operation in the brain which comes with a lot of scientists, medical people, where they can switch on and off. So they'll have their brain on, they'll think, they'll be able to look at a situation skeptically, be able to analyze it, produce good methodologies, get good results. But then there's this small compartment in their mind where they keep all the things that they don't want that to touch. And that can be religion, that can be conspiracy theories, that can be something their mother told them when they were young. It can be any of those things, but they don't let one part of their brain touch it. And whether it's out of fear, whether it's out of perhaps respect, whether it's out of, I don't know, maybe wanting to keep some sort of naivety. I don't know. But
I've heard reports, sorry to interrupt, about Dr. Ken Miller. I haven't been to one of his lectures, so take this with a grain of salt. This is from a third party. But that he'll lecture, let's say he has a 2-hour lecture. He'll talk like an hour and 30 minutes, take questions and answers on a scientific topic. And at the very end, we'll start discussing his Catholicism and why he believes in God, no matter what the topic is. And it's like, well, you have one of the best-selling textbooks out there. Your science is stupendous. You can argue on behalf of something, you can correct when you're wrong, but you still say there's a God. And it doesn't make sense to me how that mind can work both ways.
But he is valuable. It sounds harsh and cruel, but he is valuable to people like the Center for Science Education in the US, because he can testify in cases like Dover, produce all the evidence for evolution, and then he's still got his credentials there as a devout Christian. And he is useful in that sense. It doesn't make logical sense to me that he can hold both positions quite so happily, but he does, and it serves a good purpose for, cynically for us at the moment. I do think that we have someone lined up on call for us, though, if everyone's happy.
Do we?
Yep.
Who do we have?
Oh, there he is.
We did do.
Yeah, we're trying.
Boss man. There he goes again.
Hello.
Boss man?
He's connected.
Yeah, but he's
But
not talking.
Unmute your mic.
Hello.
Nope. Hung up on us.
Just
You know
very
what, this
quickly on that last point, while it's just fresh in my mind, one thing I like to throw out there, and I've got no sort of reason to back it up, no theological reason to back it up, but it's something I throw out to some people. I say, why? Just suppose for the moment that perhaps God created us through the process of evolution, in able to sort of explain to us how valuable a process this is, not just in chemistry and medicine, but in revealing other operations of how we develop, but culturally and electronically and technologically. What this by reducing it to a very basic biological level of the complexities of how evolution via natural selection works, creating us through that way is a way to reveal the potential of human intelligence and human expedition and human exploration or whatever. Now, I'm not saying, of course, obviously I don't believe in God, so I'm not saying that's the case, but I do like to throw that out to certain Christians mainly, to get their thoughts on that. And it's held with some reasonably interesting answers.
Mm-hmm.
Any examples of those answers?
Well, surprisingly, in agreement, some people have said that could be the case. The main people I've debated are more theologically tuned, so they say, well, there's no evidence for that in the Bible or whatever. To which I say, well, okay, fair enough. But it's their answers are pretty, at least interested. I think it's something that's I don't want to make this sound arrogant or pompous in any way, but it's something they haven't really contemplated before, and it's something I think because evolution plays such an important part in our daily lives, again, not just biologically, that it seems perhaps an intelligent designer may want to use that method in order to allow us to proceed onwards. And one person I spoke to thought quite confidently about that idea and said they'd need to think about it and talk to some people, but they think that could be quite a very interesting line of argument. So I don't know if I've started off something that's going to become, with no evidence and flawed reasoning or whatever, but it's something to take into consideration, or at least for them to take into consideration.
Right. I mean, evidence isn't just, well, I want this to be true, or this person said this, or whatever. Evidence is something verifiable and testable. A fossil is evidence. Now, what that fossil says is something that's up for research. But these people don't quite understand. They think that, well, if you assume God, therefore God, or the Bible says this, therefore it is. It's like those aren't pieces of evidence. And I don't know how exactly to reach them. And as a skeptic, I go, well, okay, so the Bible says this. Do we have any other corroborating evidence? And it's, nope.
Yeah. The thing with evidence, it's something that I was taught when I was studying archaeology for a time. A model known as Hawkes's ladder of inference. And the ladder is a very simple concept. You're presented with an object. It can be anything, a spoon, a rock, whatever. You're presented with it, and you can infer certain things from the object itself. So if the object has a sharp edge to it, you could infer that it was used to cut. Now, that's a reasonable inference, and that would be something like the first rung on a ladder. You could look at the object further. You could see, oh, well, it's quite pretty. It could be decorative. It could be a high status item. That's further up the ladder. And until you get to the point where you say, oh, it's so decorative that it's probably been used in religious or cultural ceremonies. And this infers a large society and various other things which become so grand and so removed from the object itself that although what you're saying may be right, you can't back it up with the evidence that you've got in your hand. And this can happen so easily with evidence today that people are presented with. They can take one simple observation and extrapolate it so far out that, I don't know, drinking X amount of water a day will improve not only your looks and your energy levels and the shine on your hair and the glow of your eyes, but it will make you smarter and more sexually virile. So many things can be drawn from such small amounts of evidence.
Is it ionized water?
If I was more sexually virile, I think I could give a bull shark a run for its money.
Welcome back, Lewis.
Yes, the pizza was delicious. I still have like half of it left. I'm not going to eat it all because I'm full, so I don't need to eat it all.
Yeah, and there's also one. Oh, I was going to say, there's just not one piece of evidence proves a huge idea, and it's not one piece of evidence will invalidate a huge idea. It's you have to take all available evidence to see whether an idea is valid. Now, like with evolution, their favorite thing, or creationist favorite thing, is if we take apart just one little idea, then all of evolution is wrong. It's like, no, if that idea is wrong, then evolution has to change around that idea.
Yeah. So we have another caller lined up. Sam said he would like to call in. So, it's Mark Zuckerberg. This is the guy from Point Man Zero's Vocally chat room who looks a lot like Mark Zuckerberg. Hey Sam, what's up?
What's up, Lef? How you doing?
I'm all right. What's up?
Yeah, so I wanted to make a point. Like I was yesterday, I had my research fellow. I'm an undergraduate research fellow at my university, and I just had my fellowship completed. I had to give a presentation, a poster presentation. Anyone involved with science knows what goes on there. You know, you basically get grilled by several professors as well as fellow students. And one of the interesting things that I was thinking about is the fact that people don't seem to understand that science doesn't say anything about theology, but sometimes theology says stuff about science. And I was wondering, like, how do you go about explaining the distinction? Because the only issue that comes up is when theology makes the claims about physical reality.
Was that directed to everyone or anyone in particular?
Anyone?
Well, I'll go first whilst everyone else thinks about it. Um, when it's cropped up for me, it tends to be in confrontation anyway. Uh, Usually, it will be a standoff between me and typically the person who's come to my doorstep telling me that I'm going to hell. And I can recall uh, talking to this person and saying, uh, right, to paraphrase his position, something had to begin everything. Fine, if that's your belief. And I could take him back through the steps of, evolution, of the production of the Earth, of the start of our sun, from all the way back, logical steps, down to the Big Bang. And I could say, right, if you want to talk about any of this, the history of our universe, then that's an evidence discussion. We can talk about that, but there will be a right and a wrong answer on pretty much everything that's there. If you want to talk about what came, in open quotation marks, before the Big Bang, then fine, that's a matter of opinion. And once I explained that to him, he dropped everything else that he was making factual claims about in the universe. It became his opinion. It became a matter of theology. And I think that that was productive because it cleared up so much of his spiel that it made the doorstep confrontation a lot shorter. But it also told a story that he felt that it was acceptable to make these claims to everyone that he came across. And not everyone that he came across would be able to take him back to that starting point, that point where science can't say one way or the other. So that's how I've dealt with it in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I've also had people argue to me that, all these things we research in science are coming true because they say it in the Bible. And I've always pointed out, well, if the Bible were valid about this, why did it take us so long to understand this? And why did it take the scientific method for us to uncover this? And then I'll also ask them what passage agrees with the science, and they'll give it to me, and it's some rambling on that has to be reinterpreted 4 different ways in order for it to get even close to what it is. It's just like your beliefs aren't scientific. You're just trying to fit your beliefs to science.
There is some grounding, I feel, in. I mean, it depends what whether we're using the term theology or religion, because of course theology is the study of religion, or under almost the pretentious of apologetics, and we have to remember that religion does retain creation claims in a sense that an ultimate beginning. So it is entitled in that respect to make claims about the physical universe in the same sense that science can. The difference is that religion makes predictive claims, or religious texts make more predictive claims, or claims made from an unknown standpoint, whereas science doesn't really lay out any predictive framework. Of course, there's the hypothesis and what one would kind of expect, but science is a lot more a practice of research, evidence, and peer review, rather than flat-out predictions. So I don't think necessarily we could dismiss religion from making physical claims. It's whether they can back up the claims that they are making, and to which Answers in Books, I think, gave gave a very clear response to of how to differentiate them. But of course, remember, religion was sort of one of our earliest attempts at explaining the ontology of everything, and remember, if we want to play their game, science, our understanding of reality works in our understanding, our comprehension, our consciousness. We can't take that out into any other realm if such a realm exists. I'm not claiming it does. I'm just giving them a little, I'm playing devil's advocate in some respect.
Right, and I've also had people point out to me, why do you guys think that the scientific method is the only tool you can use, or why do you think it's the best tool? I said, well, it is the best tool. They go, prove it. I go, well, if there was something better, we would be using that instead. And it usually shuts them up.
Well, Bear's just led straight to the point I was going to make.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's telling, very, very telling, that so many theists go for scientific evidence of their faith. Why? It's, as they will say eventually when it comes into argument, it is a faith position. They believe it. They hold it in spite of the facts. And why then is science important to them? Why do they feel that these scientific claims that they will make about such things as the age of the Earth, predictions in their books, etc., etc., why make such science-based claims about these things if it's not important in the end, which obviously it must be to them?
Well, I think that kind of strikes at the heart of the issue. What I've noticed is the problem is the people that make the more specific claims about religion have the weakest faith. That's what I've tended to notice, at least in my conversations. And I live in the States. I've had them, and even to the point where sometimes they don't go as ideally because people will just. My issue always comes up when people just will flat out deny something is a fact. But my only sticking point is when people do say that I deify science. Well, no, I don't. There's reason to believe these things. And it's a good model for the universe, and best that I know of.
Well, if I could add something, I mean, whenever I hear that, people are like, oh, like you said, you deify science. Like, no, I don't. Science doesn't hold my hand and make me feel special. It doesn't, tell me that I'm awesome or whatever. It doesn't do any of that shit. I don't worship science. It's just there to explain stuff. And it's ridiculous, this notion that we somehow deify science. It's stupid.
Well, actually, I would disagree with the first 2 points there. Not with your overall point of we don't deify science, but science can show us things that make us, or can make me feel very special. The fact that I'm here makes me feel special. When you take into account everything that came before, it is remarkable that we are here and having this conversation. And it makes me feel, personally, many positive things. But again, to not disagree too far with you, we don't deify it. We take that positive message is the wrong word, but the positive feelings of this from the evidence. It can reinforce the feelings that we have about ourselves, as well as dismiss them.
I think that's really the heart of the issue, is because for example, I think the issue is that people think that science is not scrutinized and is a replacement for religion. And I think that often is like the root of the problem. They see it as this dichotomy, and it's completely false, because science is pretty much the scientific method is the definition of scrutiny. And, I've gotten into arguments with lab mates over, whether this is the case or this is the case with a given phenomena in our model organism. And I think that that's where the root of it is. But I'll get going if you have callers waiting. But thanks for discussing.
Thanks for calling in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we should have another caller coming in shortly.
Where the hell is Blue Juggernaut today?
It's Ginger Skeptic with skepticism and policy.
Okay, so we have, I believe it's Ginger Skeptic, Ginger Atheist, sorry, is going to be calling in with a question regarding, I think it's skepticism and policy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Ginger Atheist from YouTube, and my question is, what do you as a panel think? Where do you think skepticism lines in with policy and politics as a generalization?
Lewis, do you want to go for that one?
Sure. I mean, I think, the thing is that, skepticism is such a broad term. I mean, I think that, I don't know how much of a role it plays. I think, honestly, a lot of politics is based on, public opinion and stuff like that. So, I'm not entirely sure how much of a role skepticism could play. I mean, could you give me an example of, like, what you...
Sorry, I'll specify it. So, skepticism in this is mostly science-based thinking. What I'm thinking is, you said public opinion. Well, public opinion is a recent phenomena that's happened. You can look for articles in the 1990s written by Christopher Hitchens about how this has never been happening, where people didn't care about what the public thought. But where do you think evidence where evidence should be held within what makes up a policy? Because there are certain policies that I don't want to get into a technocracy, but have science-based evidence, but shouldn't be made by scientists. Where do you think that whole idea comes into play?
Well, I think that skepticism should take part in policymaking, and particularly in places where, let's say, where it should be. If there's a claim made, like, let's say, abortion or something, and there's a claim that, it increases the chance it increases the chance for future miscarriages if you get an abortion. So if you want to have a kid later on, you may have a miscarriage, and stuff like that. I think that they should look into that, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's been considered false, but it's something that I've seen as an excuse by these pro-life advocates to try to get their agenda across. So I think they should be more skeptical in the good sense. I think they need to start actually looking into things instead of accepting almost all this stuff on blindly, or just because it furthers their agenda.
If I may contribute, this is sort of something I'm particularly interested in. Where I'm currently, my main muse, or one of the main reasons I'm here at the moment, is I'm co-founder of a website called the Society for Science of Reason, scienceofreason.org. And one of our main philosophies, one of our main policies, is that the scientific method and a skeptical approach is not only very important to science, but it can also be applicable to many other fields and many other daily operations. We believe you can apply it to morality, to politics, to art even. You can begin to weed out flawed notions and really weigh up evidence that in a non-scientific arena. For example, let's take foreign policy. To intervene in a foreign country requires a great deal of evidence, and you need a very good skeptical and scientific approach towards that before you are to engage in such a conflict. You need to weigh up casualties, you need to weigh up causes, goals, you need to weigh up the sovereignty of the country, you need to weigh up all these other things, and this is a purely scientific approach. But also the fact that the scientific method cannot be shown to be accurate without a philosophical understanding of logic, and logic cannot be proved without a scientific approach. And particularly in politics, this is very applicable. Every issue, every policy requires of usually an opposed view, and one needs to decide which view is more rational and more logical. And this applies on a humane level, and on an ethical level, and also a technical and economic level. And this scientific approach, this scientific method, although it may not be in the lab, it is very, very much at the heart of politics. And you can draw decisions and moral and ethical and moral issues from various things that are going on, and from people themselves. On our website, we've talked about Osama bin Laden and Sarah Palin and other things, and really scrutinizing more political and media issues to really gain, using a scientific and skeptical approach, to gain the best and most and least obfuscated answer that you can get from something. And I really believe that you can take the skeptical approach and the scientific method and apply it on so many different fields and get the most accurate, logical, and in many cases ethical answer.
So it's something that I would mention at this point is, in the UK, our government, aside from claiming vast amounts of expenses, they do various other things than sit around and argue. One of the big jobs that our MPs do is sit on select committees. Now, these are committees that look into various areas of policy, and they are made up of members of all parties represented in the House of Commons. And they have various remits, various topics that they look into. And this is all by the by. The important part for citizens, if you like, is the fact that their research, they're looking into these topics, produce reports and files of evidence from anyone who submits it. The reports themselves are produced by the members of the committee, and they are weighted for the quality of evidence and the recommendations. So you can see what's recommended by the committee and where they got that from. But also, all of the evidence is open as well, and these files are freely available to anyone who wants them. Now, this sort of a model produces usually quite good recommendations for the government. The problem comes in the UK that they're not always implemented. They can be ignored. They are recommendations, they're not policy.
One thing also I'd very quickly like to mention on that fact, a very good example of that is the culture, media and sports select committee that have recently been interrogating, or recently have interrogated, James and Rupert Murdoch over a recent phone hacking scandal at the News of the World, the Daily Mirror, and a number of other British tabloids. And again, they are using the scientific approach, but also you can use that on a very daily basis to someone who may come up with like an idiotic claim to say that, oh, all politicians are liars, or oh, they're screwing us over, or they're frauds. Well, actually, if you take a scientific approach and realise, but at least in Britain, how much work it takes to actually become a politician, how much scrutiny is on your work, and how difficult it is to get into the House of Parliament and then to pass legislature, you'd have to realise this has got to be someone with great passion to be able to do this. And you can, with this approach, if you really take at it, you can begin to trust people, politicians, very. It's a lot more logical to trust politicians in that respect, and realise that a lot of them, particularly in Britain, are not necessarily money-making scam thieves or whatever. And the same with policy. There's a lot of general opinion about many policy that in the wide arena is valued as, oh, it's screwing us over, or it's non-beneficial. But if you take the more rational approach and say, now hang on, are the politicians really in it for themselves, or do they actually care? Are they actually in politics for their not for their own agenda, but to help others? you can really apply that and come out with the only answer which is logically is yes. Of course, obviously there are politicians who are in it for themselves, but a lot of them generally aren't going to put that much work in just to feed their own agenda. They want to help people, and that is something that's very important to remember, and not take this sort of obscure generalized opinion that all politicians are there to screw us over.
Does that answer your question, Ginger Atheist?
Yes, but also it leaves a little part of my question a bit open. Where does science stand in the idea of technocracy or a science-based, basically the politicians are scientists, engineers, etc. That's what a technocracy is, essentially. And you would elect engineers, scientists, medical doctors to make policy. Where do you think you would stand on that? Or do we need a separate people called politicians that not necessarily have to have a science-based background, but should possibly have an evidence-based background, if you sort of understand what I'm saying there?
Well, a lot of politicians study law, and a lot of politicians are in that sort of background, and also they have incredibly large, particularly in the UK, advisory bodies in all sorts of subjects, particularly within science, to discuss issues about science. In particular, something that's cropped up at the moment is, again in the UK, but I know it's a big issue in the US, particularly with selling off the space shuttles, the economic potential and the lack of economic reach, as it's seen, that the sciences can promote. And you'll always find that technological sciences are going to get a lot more funding than the more natural sciences, because they are seen to be beneficial. In that respect, the politician not only must look at the truthfulness of any scientific claim, but also the benefits such a claim or the uses such a claim has, or fact has, in the public arena. And you'll find that a lot of politicians, of course there are many exclusions to this, like Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann, and quite a few in the United Kingdom as well, who sort of maybe fall back on that. But often you'll find that politicians usually are in line with that anyway, or at least listening to their advisory body, because they are told from the moment they get into politics how much they need to rely on getting all the facts and figures before making any important decisions. And I think that principle itself is quite scientific as well in its approach.
That answered my question. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Right, we've got Bossman lined up. Hopefully his connection will work better this time. See how we get on. Right.
Awesome. It's good. Anyone who isn't aware of what's going on in the chat channel is pretty hilarious.
Oh, we're just looking at the Blog TV chat here.
Yeah, someone named Lady Finger Lover has stated that the double slit... Okay, just real fast.
Okay.
It's stated that the double slit experiment proves that consciousness and the universe are linked together.
Well, that's just Deepak Chopra nonsense. It can be thrown out. No one needs to take
Yeah, I
that
know,
seriously.
and calls to show us. I've even asked for the DOI link for the experiment that has that conclusion, and the person refuses to give that, and is doing everything that he or she can to avoid directly answering our request for clarification.
Well, there you go. You've got a direct example of a bad skeptic there. It does not worth of attention.
They should just call in. Right, Bossman, can we hear you this time?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
A little quiet, but...
I'll try and turn myself up. Just give me a second. Tools. Options. Right, I'm going to turn my microphone up. Is that any better?
Yep, that's fine.
That's fine.
All right. Hello. Yeah,
Hello.
Yeah, the point I want to make out is that science can be wrong about stuff. I mean, I can give you a personal thing of why I'm a bit, what's the word, cynical, if that's the right word. Yeah, that is the right word. Now, I was diagnosed from when I was about 11 of the learning difficulty dyspraxia, and I was told from a pretty young age that I couldn't achieve anything by people who were medical and scientific. And educational people. Now, I'm a pretty stubborn person. I won't be told that I can't do something. And 2 years ago, I graduated university. So I mean, I think if something as weird as stupid as me can disprove it, I think it's okay to be cynical of it. And plus, I mean, let's say for example, let's talk about evolution for a minute. I think that Ken Holven and Dwayne Gist do a good thing, which is promote this idea of like, let's say, enhanced knowledge about evolution.
Right. First of all, could you turn your microphone back down, because we are getting feedback now?
Oh, sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
Just a minute, give me a sec. There you go. Is that
Okay. Yeah, that sounds better now.
Okay.
Right. First off, congratulations on graduating from university. The second thing, you were diagnosed with dyspraxia.
Yeah.
Now, when you were diagnosed, obviously that would have come from a doctor, trained medical professional.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I wasn't diagnosed until later, because it's something that's usually diagnosed when people are usually about 5 or 6, when they're starting to learn. But I didn't get taught until I was about later years of what in the UK would be primary school. I don't know in the US that would be, but it's basically that.
Okay, so you got diagnosed later with dyspraxia and then told by, was it the medical professional, or was it?
It's both my GP and the people who I'd often go and see, and later on it was people at the college who told me that that I should set my targets low, as it were.
Right. Okay. Well, I've been in schools in a teaching capacity from time to time, and that is terrible. I can't support what they said there at all. Just because you've got a learning difficulty doesn't mean that you should necessarily drop your expectations of what you can achieve. Okay, there will be certain limits to things that you can do, like say someone had a muscle wasting disease. It would be unfair to promote the idea in their head that they could ever be a champion weightlifter. But the simple fact is that dyspraxia wouldn't put you in that sort of a category. You obviously, as you've shown, have the ability to achieve academically. It is just harder, and the fact that you've gone ahead and achieved is a credit to you. Now, I think that it's not the case that science as a method had failed you there, more that the people that you trusted or fortunately rebuked, they let you down by their poor interpretation of the facts. Now, such facts could be that people with I do not look like that whilst teaching. Sorry, I'm just reading. The facts could be something along the lines of people with dyspraxia, on average, will achieve lower grades than those without. That's a statistical fact. You could say that, on average, so-and-so is unable to do this. Fine. But that doesn't include the rest of the bell curve. If you can imagine a bell curve, a bell shape on a graph, the large peak in the middle, the top of it, is the average, the main bulk of people. But either end, you've got tails. the smaller parts where people are well above the average, as written in green, and below the average in red. Now, there are things for every situation that people can do to help themselves, typically, to get above average. And you obviously succeeded in doing those things, and therefore the claims about the average dyspraxic person didn't apply to you. So you managed to do well, or that would be my assessment of it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
I'd like to come in because I've got dyslexia, and well, it kind of been assumed that I had dyslexia all my life. It wasn't actually completely confirmed until I was in the later years of college. But the fact I got into college was fine. I'm very surprised people would tell you that. It's generally assumed as a policy in schooling and in college never to talk that way, and so is the trust one has with their GP and their psychologist or whatever, whoever is examining you in this case, that just making someone depressed about such an issue is not only infactual, but it's also incredibly heartless thing to do. And so I'm incredibly surprised that happens. But again, as just to echo what Answers in Books said, there were many of us that beat the average. I did 6 years at college and got the highest got the highest qualifications in media I could get at that college. And I'm looking to pursue further degrees. You've just passed university. I know many dyspraxic and dyslexic people who have easily shone through university and college and schools with bright colours. But again, it's not. Some cynicism shouldn't be directed towards the science, because you had some bad people that were doing it. Remember, it's the science that really divulged this condition, that showed you had dyspraxia, and it wasn't the people that necessarily did it or their opinions afterwards. So it's not that the science should be mistrusted in that respect. Also, on your second point, I don't think that what Kent Hovind and Dwayne Gish are doing is positive in any way. It's only going to make the non-converted even more truncheon in their views, and it's only going to pull the converted further into it. I agree, discussion about evolution is good, but I don't think the notion that it's that it's flawed is one that should ever be entertained. In a very serious field. Of course, I'm not saying ban the free speech in that respect, but personally, I don't think what they're doing is very good at all. And the less we hear of them, the better, I feel.
I would also like to add two things to that. For me, was also the prediction that I wouldn't go much further than a very low level, just above special education, and well, I could be like something like a gardener. That was the prediction with how much I could achieve. And I actually managed to get a degree, a bachelor degree. And the thing is, with a prediction at a young age, it's a snapshot at where you are at that time with your disease, with the knowledge of that disease or whatever situation you're in. And that's what they extrapolate based on their experience. It doesn't have to be that's what will happen for you, because you can improve with your health, or treatments can come along to help you with everything. Same thing with, I had a similar experience in the medical community. When they diagnosed what I had, they said I had 4 years to live, period. I would be dead at the age before I would reach the age of 10. And that was based on what they currently knew about the disease I have. And that was, if you're diagnosed with this disease at that age, you will not pass your 10th birthday on average. Now, with our better diagnostic tools, we know that we are earlier with diagnosing the disease, and it doesn't have to pan out that at that age, if you're diagnosed then, that you actually will progress like they used to suspect. You can be asymptomatic, or you can be slightly symptomatic, or you can die from it. It really depends on the situation and the knowledge.
Somebody's moving furniture, it sounds like.
Sorry about that. I just had to turn on the lights. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, but the thing is that the universities now, for people in the UK, have a lot of extra help, like for people who have these difficulties, and I don't see why people who only problem in life is that they got a bad card, as it were, they got dealt a bad hand. I don't see it should be any sort of hindrance to them that they can't achieve this. And as I said, I do think the problem is that I think the science is on this particular subject a bit wrong, because again educational help and like with the internet and writing tools and spell checks and all that stuff, it's made people with maybe like dyslexia and dyspraxia a bit more on an even keel than they would have been maybe 10 or 20 years ago.
I mean, the point you're making there is something akin to imagining Stephen Hawking's. I mean, he obviously is an intelligent man. He has helped us develop theories in regards of black holes, and his advances wouldn't be as easily produced. I understand that they're not easily produced, but they wouldn't be as easily produced if it weren't for the additional help that he gets in the form of care of his interface with his computer. These things allow for that even playing field whereby his mind is able to work and get these ideas out to the world. And what you're saying there about the extra time in exams, the extra support, they are all exactly the same thing for people with less obvious handicaps, and they do nothing but help everyone. So anyone who complains about them is wrong.
I agree. I mean, I used extra help when I was at university. And to answer that guy before about evolution, so sorry, that's a bit of a side tangent. I do think it's a good thing in the way that I think it helps us understand the method more, because it makes us understand, because again, not a lot of people are scientifically literate. I mean, I think, was it about maybe 20-30% maybe are, and then the rest of them just sort of have maybe a layman's knowledge of it, if we're being charitable.
But that's of course is the problem there, because then what creationist intelligent design people do is they employ sciencey sounding words like intelligent design or creationist science, and to a layperson that could attract them in, and of course they're not going to learn anything about evolution from a creationist.
I don't know. I mean, again, it depends what you mean by creationist. I mean, do you mean like New Earth? Because I mean, for example, I know that some old Earth who have the basic understandings of evolution but don't quite grasp the theory.
And anyone that denies evolution as a scientific fact is what it doesn't have to be a creationist. It can be an atheist who, for whatever reason, denies it. Anyone out, we can make it secular if we want. Anyone who denies evolution is who I'm talking about. You're not going to learn anything from them about evolution, because their whole belief is based upon a flawed understanding of evolution to begin with. Because it's not that you shouldn't question evolution, but scientifically you have absolutely no ground to stand on if you begin to question it scientifically. You can question the processes, you can question some of the things we know about it, but as to whether evolution occurs and is occurring, there is no doubt about it. But a evolution denier is not going to be able to influence you in any way unless they just pound you with so much that you just want to escape. Personally, I don't think the discussion on that topic, again, this is a personal thing, I don't think discussion on that topic is at all helpful. I think it's either going to lead people in or push people away, and unfortunately it's not pushing enough people away as it's bringing in, and every year there's a new bit of legislator that's attempted to go through under a rebranding of creationism or intelligent design or whatever, and that is just intellectually dishonest and hypocritical and just wrong, and that is not scientific in any sense. And if you want to educate and be scientific and promote scientific literacy, that you're not going to go about it by listening to scientifically illiterate people or scientifically fraudulent people like evolution deniers.
If I may jump in on that, I have used what I'll put in quotes here as skeptics in some of the work I've done in schools. When I put in quotes skeptics, I mean conspiracy theorists. And I've used them as examples. So what I would typically do is take a small segment of a video from online and show it to a class and say, right, let's look at this, or not even that, just leave it playing and let them watch it. And after it's been through, stop and say to them, right, now what do you know about this subject? Because it would have come after they'd been taught about a relevant area of science. So for the woman in California who complained about rainbows appearing in her sprinkler and pointing to this being evidence of a great conspiracy of metallized salts in the water, I showed that and said, right, well, what do we know about this? And the class had already done work on spectroscopy, just basic stuff that light breaks down into various colors and you can tell certain things from that. Fine. They were able to then say straight away, we know about this. We're able to piece something together, and I got them to write their own response to Sprinkler Woman. And that was fine. It engaged them and it gave them something to focus on. Now, being able to use this intellectual confrontation, this intelligent drama, if you like, of being able to argue with someone is a very useful tool. And that's the only use I can see creationists being used for. But the problem comes with creationists is that they blur the scientific issue with religion, and that's considered taboo. And that makes it very difficult to utilize.
Well, could I just say something? Right. Well, the problem is, I mean, I'm a Christian, just to get that out of the way. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem is that there's this false dichotomy that you can't hold both ideas to be true. And this is nincompoopery. This is rubbish of the highest order. Now, if you know anything about creationism, it started in the US, I think, about when the Protestant Reformation hit there, I think it's about 1872, I think. This whole stuff started, the whole biblical literalism. So, and the problem is that people say, and I think it's some people's, let's call them people like A. Wilson and people like that, who say that you can't hold both ideas to be true. Now, I think this is nincompoopering because, again, there's nothing wrong with that, and I always point to what Charles Darwin said, which is that while he may not have believed in God himself, he knew people who did, like Ezra Gray, and he didn't see a problem with that.
Well, let me just clarify there. I wasn't saying that it's impossible to teach evolution without promoting atheism as a default, or forcing pupils to recant their Christianity. What I was actually getting to was it makes it more difficult because the religious aspect is then thrown in with science, and all it would take is one pupil to report back to their parents or for complaint to come back that what happened in the classroom was trying to attack their faith rather than the scientific claims that have been taken up by their faith or supporters of their faith, which were in fact the subject of scrutiny. That was the point I was making, not the fact that teaching evolution is going to force Christians to...
No, I mean, I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying that some people think it does, and I'm saying not really.
There is no philosophically, there is no conflict between science and religion. If religion is taken, if you don't take, if it's not biblical, if you're not taking literally, I don't see any conflict between evolution and the existence of a deity. I gave a reason why perhaps that could be so earlier. The problem is, as Answer's book said, is when you base your scientific theory or supposed scientific theory, put forward as science, upon upon biblical claims, before you actually update that and look at what is being said. You said biblical literacy came around the Reformation. We've got to remember is that the Bible was taken as literal for right up to basically the 1912, until Darwin sort of put forth his idea of evolution via natural selection. And that's why there was so much problem back in the 1920s with the Scopes trial when it was banned. Wasn't allowed to be taught. That is when we talk about religion encroaching upon the classroom and upon science. And I don't think science or religion are in conflict in the slightest when you're sensible about both. When you're sensible about the limitations of both, there is no, and realistic, there is no conflict between them. And anyone that says there is wrong, because there is no, unless you become biblically literal.
Okay. Well, the thing is that maybe I was wrong about the 18th century, but it's around the 17th century, so about 1800 some sort of. Because this is American movement, bit of biblical literalism, and it's nothing to do with how it's been read. Actually, there's somebody who's a better authority than me who goes by the name of All Saints Monastery, who's a really nice guy. He does stuff about that, about where biblical literalism came from. And I agree with you. But I think the problem is that in some of these places, that is the issue, is that some people think that if you have to accept evolution, then you have to deny that a deity exists. And I think that's the problem with some people, is that they think that you have to believe in one or the other. And I think that's the cornerstone of the problem.
And that's the humorous position of the creationist. It shows the creationists as, like AnswersinBooks touched upon this earlier, the fact they're so desperate for some kind of science, they call it creation science. That's the irony of the creationist movement, is they think you have to take the Bible literally for God to exist. They are making the same error that that atheists make, that certain atheists make, when they claim that evolution disproves God, or is an example of why God probably doesn't exist. I have to agree with what AnswersinBooks said earlier when it came to talking about the perfect body, and then mentioning about the flaws in it, although I'm sure AnswersinBooks was being humorous when he was arguing with them and employing their rhetoric, which he admitted. And so creationists are just as wrong as in that respect, saying that we need to be literate when it comes to these claims, as the atheist is when they say, well, I mean, Richard Dawkins has said a number of times that for him evolution is not his biggest reason, but he finds it very difficult to reconcile a belief in God with evolution. I think that is rubbish. I don't see any reason for that, and that's a problem I have with both atheists and creationists on that respect, is they're both wrong when it comes to that. The issue comes, as Answer's book said, when you start encroaching upon religious and scientific grounds. It's when do you teach religion in the classroom, and when do you teach in the science classroom, and when do you teach science in the religious classroom? And that's the issue. You shouldn't teach biblical literature in the science room, because there is nothing scientific really about it. It's nothing. You don't put forward tests. You don't test certain equations that are in the Bible, because there aren't any. But that doesn't mean that God is not a part of this great plan. Again, I don't believe he is, but I don't see any good argument to suggest he's not, from evolution itself. I don't think anything in our universe that we know of can actively disprove or go some way to disproving a God. It just shows that God has either moved himself away to allow biological processes to occur, and that there is nothing supernatural in this world. But there's a very good reason for that, and if we have time, I can come on to that. But I don't want to take up much more time, other people's time.
Okay, did that all answer your points there, boss man?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thanks.
Thank you for calling.
Bye.
Right then, I don't think we've got any more callers lined up, so
I just want to point out I'm very warm and fuzzy right now.
20 minutes left.
warm and fuzzy.
Yes. People are like coming after me for escorting lady finger lover out.
Can I just very briefly pick up on something that I left off there, and perhaps it was wrong of me to do so. And I'll be as quick as I can. It's something I've discussed with Christians on a number of levels. Is that if the concept of free will is to, which isn't something I necessarily adhere to, but if we are to take free will at all seriously, which all Christians must, then you have to realize God cannot leave his signature anywhere. Ergo, there cannot be any intelligent design about this universe, because any hint that it was intelligently designed would lead to the conclusion that a God did it, which would eliminate the freedom to believe in God. So philosophically, we know design cannot be put forward. God would have had to have created the world absent of any signature of his in order for us to have the freedom to believe in him or not, and the freedom to express a number of other beliefs that such that would be the foundation of such a topic. So if the bacterial flagellum really was irreducibly complex, that would be an intrusion upon free will by a god. And so therefore we can rule out irreducible complexity. We can rule out a lot of intelligent design when it's put forward from a Christian perspective, philosophically, without even needing to employ the science. But of course we have the science there that helps. That's just the point I was leading on to, and perhaps was sort of a bit cheeky for me not to have continued with it.
Okay. Changing the subject slightly and maybe getting back to our main topic of the evening, good and bad skeptics. Quickly, just a straw poll, who on the panel regards themselves as probably a good skeptic?
I like to think I'm a good skeptic, under the definitions we've put forward.
Okay. Bear, good skeptic or not?
I'm usually a better skeptic when I'm, full and had a few to drink and, pretty woman's across the hall. But otherwise, nah, I'm closed-minded.
Closed-minded. Lewis? Oh, he's away eating
pizza.
No, I'm here. I was just wondering which Lewis you wanted.
You.
Okay. Most people want me. What's your question? How may I help you, my son?
Do you consider yourself a good or a bad skeptic?
I guess I'd be a good one.
Good one. And if Colin's available, good or bad skeptic? Colin's just let us know that he thinks he's a good skeptic. Okay. In which case then, for the people who answered positively to that, so everyone except Bear.
Oh, good for you!
Being good skeptics, what is the most cherished thing that you had to give up belief in due to your skeptical position? If we start with Mr. Beach.
Believing I was right all the time.
You cherished believing you were right all the time?
Humorously. I thought that would get a bigger laugh. I don't know. I've always been very skeptical, and so I cannot really think of anything that I deeply cherish to give up. It's what I've always been, this sort of mindset. And so I can't remember. I know I once believed in God, but I don't think I felt bad when I stopped believing in God at all. I felt quite relieved. I can't think of anything. That may sound really arrogant, but I honestly can't think of anything, I'm afraid.
Mr. Beach is an arrogant skeptic. Lewis?
Trying to convince myself that the centimeter side of the ruler was actually inches when I was measuring my penis. I had to give that up.
That,
No,
that
but
was
in
a
seriousness,
cherished moment.
that was a cherished moment, dude. I'm like, yes, fucking 20 centimeters or I don't know, whatever. Um, I don't even know what number that would be. I don't know. Either way, I don't know. I probably had to. I don't know. Just it's. I don't really think of what stuff I've had to actually sacrifice. I mean, the belief in God. I mean, not that I cherish that too deeply. Now that I mean, that's easy to say now that I'm an atheist, but I mean, I wasn't destroyed by, uh, by being an atheist when I converted to when I deconverted rather. I was never traumatized by, oh God, there's no God. So I don't know. I don't really think I've had to sacrifice that much in order to be skeptical of stuff.
Okay. I'm not sure if Colin's ready to give an answer. So in the time that he's getting ready, because I'm not going to let him out of answering the question, uh, I will answer mine.
I have a good one actually. Now that I think about it, I've had to give up on the idea that the Texans are actually Super Bowl contenders. That hurts me.
Fair enough. For everyone who's not American or not Texan, it probably doesn't matter that much, and we don't understand your pain, but we accept it. For me, the biggest thing, the most cherished thing that I've had to give up from holding a skeptical point of view is immediate and unquestioning trust in other people. It's something that I think we all have as children, and it would be the case with me, and that then drops away, and it is a sad thing that you realize the world isn't compatible with that position for grown people. And that was a cherished position because it made life so simple. I hope Colin's ready to answer the question now.
Yeah, I'm online now. Well, I didn't really have any really weird beliefs like the Truther movement or something like that, or believing in UFOs. I was more, say, open, like how they mean it to the idea. So it's more like the road you took for me. Let's say the loss of innocence, if that makes any sense.
I think that that's something that pretty much everyone everywhere will be able to relate to. So whether they identify as a good skeptic or not.
I just want to chime in that as a skeptic, I feel guilty that I've had to give up being religious for Lent.
Oh dear. Right, I think we dropped Mr. Beach for a second there.
I think I may have become more cynical. I think that may be something. I don't know if that just makes me an asshole or if that has anything to do with the skepticism part. But I don't know. I just seem to be more cynical. I try to be optimistic about certain things. Like I'm optimistic that that our species will one day get over itself and our petty differences. But overall, like in certain things, like the debt ceiling, I think we're fucked. I don't know. I just think there does come a sense of or a bit of of cynicism when you are a skeptic.
I think I should just come back on it. Some things I gave a bit of thought. I've lost a few friends actually, not necessarily because taking up a skeptical point of view, but what I was saying earlier about applying skepticism to politics and things like that. Politically, I've fallen out with quite a lot of people, and I don't talk to them much anymore. Not just politically in a global sense, but politically in a social sense. Sort of how people argue or when people take up their beliefs or whatever. I found my relationships aren't compatible with other people's, and I've had to. A couple good friends of mine I no longer talk to or have communication with because we were just so different politically, as I said, both on a cultural and social level and on a general issues level, that our relationship just wouldn't function on that. So I guess in a way that can be related to the development of my skepticism and its application in other fields away from science and superstition and things like that.
Another follow-up question for everyone, or something to discuss. What would you consider the most important application of skepticism today? So in what area, what field specifically, rather than as Mr. Beach uses it generally for all purposes, all areas. If you had to just pick one, which one would you choose? So if we go for Lewis first, maybe?
Religion. It's got to be religion. I mean, because I hope you were meaning me, Lewis.
Yep.
If I mean, the funny thing to me is, like, if I'm talking to someone and I say, what Scientologists believe, that Xenu, the Galactic Confederacy or whatever the fuck it was, that was around 13 trillion years ago. He seeded the planet, and then I'm not. This is what my understanding, that then he blew up the volcanoes with a hydrogen bomb, and that caused life to start and whatever, and that we've got these thetans or whatever in our bodies, and they're like, that's ridiculous. But on the other hand, the same person will believe that there was a garden with a talking snake and Adam and Eve, and yeah, that's cool. But the Scientologists, they're the fucking crazy ones. I think that's where skepticism is most needed, as religion.
Bear, would you agree?
I'd say education, because we really can't further education without being healthily skeptical of what we're told. I mean, if you just accept what someone tells you, how are you really furthering education?
All right, so that would be skepticism on part of the learner rather than skepticism of the teacher.
Well, even with the teacher, I mean, the teacher still has plenty to learn. If the teacher learns something wrong without being skeptical of it and teaches that to the kids, that harms the kids too.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only reason I ask is because teachers are obviously trained on various methods, and these methods are based on various scientific studies as to how best pupils learn. So I was wondering whether you meant application of skepticism to those studies by the teacher, or the learner to the teacher's teachings.
I thought you just wanted a general, where will skepticism help? And
Yeah,
just generally in education.
But then you started giving a little bit of a detailed answer, and I thought I'd push you.
Fine. That'll teach me to keep my mouth shut. No, even like with lab science, you're given the lab to set up, but you're not given the results you're supposed to find. And that's healthy skepticism coming in there. You're supposed to be able to figure out why you're setting up this experiment, and then eventually be able to set up your own. So it just helps if you give people the ability to think for themselves, rationalize, be logical, that eventually they'll be able to take over for themselves. And if we don't allow skepticism in there, then education is going to fall the way it is in Texas.
Fair enough. Mr. Beach?
Definitely, without a doubt, politically. I think removing any sense of skepticism or the scientific approach when it comes to politics would be incredibly dangerous, and particularly when concerning foreign policy, but also domestic issues, which encompasses all the other issues. And I think skepticism definitely needs to be at its most active and most aware in its best form in politics, without a doubt, in my opinion.
Fair enough. I would have gone for politics, but I'll go for my second choice, seeing as it's already been taken. And I'll pick consumer skepticism.
You would.
I would. I think that if consumers became skeptical consumers of products, that by buying power alone, they would be able to affect great change in various systems, various businesses and industries. If they demanded clearer proof, clearer understanding of what it was that was meant to be producing effects of their food, their supplements, their medications, alternative health, if they pushed for those things and were able to then choose based on evidence, I think that would have a massive transformative effect on society at large. And no one seems to disagree with me. No one seems to disagree, so I'm quite happy.
We're in awe at how smart you are.
We're in awe at the deepness of what you just said. I actually have to go change underwear. It's all sticky.
That's the second time this show.
Was the first time due to pizza?
No, I don't
to
get
the
that.
joy of having the pizza delivered.
I don't get that excited about pizza. Shit, I'm not that much of a fat ass.
We weren't saying you were.
You're acting like I'm from Cleveland or something.
Hey, now in Cleveland we order sausage for delivery.
Really? That's fucked up.
It's a big Polish population up there.
Oh, that explains why it sucks.
Hey, some good Polish takeout up there.
So anyways, well, the show's pretty much coming to an end. We've got about 5 minutes left, or maybe we can, if nobody really has anything to add, I guess we could stop the show a little bit early.
Well, quickly in chat channel, say one word we can talk about for 1 minute.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Stick those 5 minutes up your ass.
Penis.
Penis.
Lewis, as a Texans fan, really doesn't have one, so he compensates
Fuck
by...
you, asshole. Texans are going to steamroll the fucking Browns if they play them this season.
Dude, the Browns are going to just... It's going to be like a 45-0 game. Don't worry about it.
You have Colt McCoy. He's an inbred asshole.
The Browns have always had inbred assholes. We've still gone pretty far.
Yeah, that's why your fucking owner left y'all assholes and went to Cincinnati.
I think we've got
Hey,
Tea Party insanity thrown in here as an option for discussion.
Well, I mean, we already know the Tea Party's crazy. I mean, right there. If Michelle Bachmann is a viable candidate, that should say something about your party.
Someone brought up giant. You know what giants leads to? Nephilim. You know what Nephilim are?
Oh, speaking of Nephilim,
there we go.
Who heard about Nephilim Free though? His computer died.
Oh.
So he won't be able to make videos for God knows how long. Because
he'll have to go out and get a job. Or learn how to get to the library in the next town.
That's a good one. Him getting a job. But yeah, so apparently God knows how long before Neff can make videos again. Maybe there is a God.
Well, if he wants, I have an old Tandy 1000 somewhere in storage.
This was a triumph.
It still might have like
huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction. What?
Someone in Shock's room told X35 yesterday that God gave him a laptop.
He's probably just e-begging again. Like, does someone have an extra one I can have? Thank you, brother.
I need to be able to upgrade my computer soon. I'm tired of it. It won't render videos properly anymore.
Oh, that blows.
Yeah.
I use a laptop for video rendering.
Video takes 12 hours to render.
Fucking tits! That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's dying.
Dude, my videos are in are in 720, and it doesn't take that. It doesn't even take an hour.
Yeah, but probably all your USB.
Sorry, I have something caught in my throat. Nobody make a fucking joke.
I made the wrong kind of party. So, while we're ending the show, and we had a little fun here at the end. Answers in Books and Lewis and Beach. Since you guys are guests this week, any final thoughts?
I'll let Lewis go first if he's got any.
Screw good gold.
Answers?
Whatever.
I concur.
Quick question. Speaking of that guy, whatever happened? Did you ever hear from him again? What happened there?
Well, we got him to take his water filters off because we identified two pictures that were a picture that was stolen from this other site, alkaline water site. We pointed out that his picture of him on a magazine was him photoshopping his face onto Indiana Jones.
What the fuck?
he advertised himself in a magazine called Adventure Life, which was actually a 1950s comic strip that we found. But if you go to one of his websites, his water fall website, there's a picture of him on a magazine called Adventure Life. It's actually a picture of Indiana Jones, and he's photoshopped his face on top of him. When scienceofreason.org is back up and running, we went down briefly, but we're coming back up. You can read all the articles on the water ionization. Answers in Books contributed one. I contributed one about good gold, and there's lots on there. We've got all the pictures of him photoshopped next to the actual Indiana Jones picture.
Wow.
So he's still doing his blog, but what the best thing is that whenever you put Waterworks for you into Google, the top one is him. Then all the others are usually just criticism of him.
I'll just finish up there with what I know so far is that previous to the letter, as Lewis has said, various things got pulled off his website. One of his suppliers will no longer do business with him. Various other people have complained about him. Lots of bad things have been put into press now. He himself has done very little in publicity terms, and he's now confining himself to his blog. So, yes, I think that we've just officially gone over time.
Who would have thought the power of YouTube?
Thank you this week to AnswersinBooks and Lewis Beach for coming in when almost everyone on Skeptic TV had something better to do. Thank you to Eli Fayad for being this week's host, even though he left for most of the show to eat delicious pizza while we had no food.
Hey, I was gone for like fucking 30 minutes.
And thank you to Colin Masson, who again shows that he's technically superior to everyone else in the Skeptic TV crew, and that he gets the show running with absolutely no glitch. And thank you for being like gopher on all the photos. You were,
which means we're better than the Magic Sandwich Show.
The Magic what? Never heard of them.
Yeah, they're these small time guys that have a couple of assholes on the show. They have a pedophile there.
Oh.
On the show,
we get
he's
pedophile on our show. Maybe we'll get ratings.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for having me back on.
Sure. And we'll be back in 2
me.
weeks. If you want to know the topic in 2 weeks, go to our website, skeptictv.net.
Oh, Chris, quick thing before we leave. This is funny because this was totally unintentional. I'm playing my franchise in Madden 11, and I'm playing as the Texans. And guess who I had to play this week? That's right.
Browns?
Uh-huh. I'm playing them right now. Guess what the score is?
45-0 in favor of the Browns.
Nope, it's 63-10 me at halftime.
Anyways, thank you again, everyone. Sorry for going over, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Goodbye.
Bye.